thank you for inviting me. It's very nice to be here. And I think the little French I understand from Andrea's introduction, I understood she already told you what I'm going to talk about. So it's about multilingualism, research on multilingualism in Norwegian ECEC. And I will have some of the teachers' perspectives, a bit of the parents' perspectives, and also about the children's voices. And the reason why there are two universities on the slide is that I moved 4 years ago, and I used to work in the north at the UiT, and now I work in the University of Inland Norway. But much of my research has a link to the UiT still, so that's why it's fair to have both. I'll start trying to give you a short introduction to the Norwegian context. We have an increasing transnational diversity, which means many people moving to Norway from other countries. Around 20% of the children in kindergarten or in early childhood have a transnational migration background. And we also have an indigenous people, the Sami, and we have 5 national minorities, and they are the historical linguistic diversity we have in the country. There has been a long process of internal colonization until around the 1950s, 60s, and from then on there has been starting a process of reclamation and revitalization of the indigenous languages, the Sami languages, also some of the minority languages. And that's where we are now. The education institutions used to be, unfortunately, central in the colonization, and now they are central in the revitalization. That's important to know. If you had binoculars, you would probably see it on the slide. The area around Tromsø has 3 names, and that is because there is a Norwegian name, there is a Kven name, which is one of the minority languages, and there is the Sami name for the area, North Sami to be specific. When it comes to kindergarten, we always say that kindergarten ECEC has a holistic approach, which means that we combine education and care. It's not either or, it's always all of it. The children who attend the ECEC are 1 to 5 years old, and there's a strong focus on democracy and children's rights, and a strong focus on treating children as equal subjects with adults. There's also an intrinsic value of childhood, not only in the education but in the whole society, which means that we value childhood as an important period of its own, not only as a passing through for becoming older, becoming an adult. And when it comes to multilingualism, there are, like many other places, conflicting discourses on the policy level, which means that on the one hand, we celebrate diversity, there is a value of diversity and multilingualism. On the other hand, there's quite a strong focus on learning and developing Norwegian. And that has been, many researchers have written about that already. Another short part of the introduction is that we have a framework plan for ECEC. We don't like to call it curriculum because it's a plan, not a curriculum. It's not the same as the school has. And there are some guidelines. It's full of guidelines for the teachers. It's not, there are no aims for the students, for the children, only guidelines for the teachers. And here are a few of the most important ones when it comes to the linguistic diversity. The first one, that kindergarten is to ensure that linguistic diversity becomes an enrichment for all children. That is for the transnational children. And also the next one, that they're supposed to encourage multilingual children to use their mother tongue and also promote and develop the children's Norwegian or Sami language skills. And then the next one about the Sami kindergartens is the type of kindergarten we have in Norway where Sami language is the primary language, which means they don't mainly speak Norwegian, they speak Sami, and that is part of the revitalization process of the Sami languages. And then then there's also the guideline that Sami children should be supported in preserving and developing their language, their knowledge, and their culture, irrespective of where in Norway they live. That is a task every kindergarten has to follow. And for all those regular Norwegian kindergartens that don't have Sami as their primary language, because most of the kindergartens, and for most of the kindergartens, Norwegian is the primary language, they still have to highlight the Sami culture and ensure that the children develop and respect for and solidarity with the diversity of the Sami culture. So which means, and that's important for the last part of the talk, that Sami culture is an important aspect in every kindergarten. If there are Sami children or not, that doesn't matter. It just differs on which level and how much you treat it and for whom. Okay, I'll get to my first. Is that me? I'll get to my first project, which is actually my PhD study. I finished it a while ago, but it's okay. Sorry. Yeah, now it stopped. Oh, this is moving on while we are waiting here. I can see. It has stopped, whatever it was. Okay, I'll try to carry on. And the study I did for my PhD was a study about how kindergartens create multilingualism and which discursive conditions they have for the teachers have for the linguistic practice with multilingual children. And these nice pictures are just a very short introduction into my theoretical framework, and I will not use very much time on this now, and probably I also would bore you quite a while if I started going on about that. But it's based on a dialogic perspective of learning and language, which originates from Michael Bachtin. And it is based on the views on multilingualism from the book by Ofelia Garcia and Li Wei. I'll show you them on the next slide. And also an important third part of the theoretical framework was language ideologies. And they appeared almost immediately when I started talking with the teachers about how they conceptualize and understand multilingualism. Their language ideologies were very different. But maybe this is the most important thing to show to understand the rest. I don't know if you know these models. Are they known in?
No, they're not very well known.
Okay.
CUP, we did talk about it last year.
Yeah.
In the 2-hour session.
Yeah. Well, I'll try the short version. The most traditional way of understanding multilingualism, according to Garcia and Li Wei, is the bicycle. And the bicycle, if you imagine a bicycle, you will find that if one of the wheels is much smaller than the other, the bicycle gets unbalanced. And then if you transfer this idea to understanding multilingualism, like as one wheel is one language and the other wheel is a second or at least another language, then the idea of getting these wheels or languages balanced and being equal gets very strong. And it's pointed out as a very traditional model of bilingualism or multilingualism, not because because Garcia and Li Wei are very in favor of that, but to criticize the idea that the languages have to be big enough or equal, totally equal, because only then somebody is multilingual if you know all your languages in the same domain and the same arena just equally well. The other, maybe you remember from last year then, is the Commons model, the dual iceberg. And I don't know how much you know about icebergs. In Norway, they're quite well known because it's a cold country and there's a lot of ice, at least in the north. So, but what is typical for an iceberg is that most of the iceberg is below the water. So what you see on top are the languages that we hear or listen to, or maybe we can see that somebody writes. We can read when somebody has written. In kindergarten, they don't write, so it's mainly we can listen to what the children are saying. But then to know that they affect each other below, which is that many things like understanding concepts, understanding mathematics, all these things, they get together but it's not necessarily so easy to observe them. The third model is what Garcia and Liwai promote. It's the dynamic view of multilingualism. And I don't know if you've tried writing an ATV before. In case you have, you know it really adjusts to the environment, so it will take you around in a different way than a bicycle does. And that is the picture for the dynamic interaction of languages within the multilingual child or individual, or also within multilingual groups. So it's a different way of understanding communication, and it does not view languages as separate entities anymore. That was the very short version. My project was based on ethnography as a research approach, which means in the way I did it, understanding what teachers were doing and why they were doing it, also from their perspectives. So really getting inside the kindergarten culture, not just viewing it as an outsider. And there were 2 kindergartens in the study, so I organized them as 2 cases, and this is where the case study comes in. And if you look at the picture in front, which is by the Nexus, it's called Nexus Analysis. I really don't expect you to know it. It's by Skollen and Skollen, and that's an ethnographic discourse analysis where you study social action, which is you study what people do, and you try to map the discourses that go through these that influence the action, and they in the Nexus analytic framework are connected to either the historical body of the participants, which is the socialization you have, your beliefs, your values that are connected to your education. Maybe they might be connected to discourses in place, which are overarching, more general discourses, for example in policy documents or in an institution. And they might also relate to the interaction order, which is types of interaction and the expectations you have towards each other. For example, in encounters between parents and teachers, what they expect each other to do and what they might legitimize or not. And when it comes to the discourse perspective, Bartin also comes in because he differs between authoritative discourses, which have a lot of power and are really strong, and what he calls individually persuasive discourses, which is more something you might be only for an individual person, and they are not especially powerful, but they might be very persuasive for oneself. And this is what these are my 2 kindergartens from that study. We have Globeflower Kindergarten, which is and was in Norway, and I actually left the Norwegian context for that study as well, and moved to Germany for a while to study a kindergarten there, and that kindergarten I called Sunflower. It's not their real names, of course. And you can also see which type of data I collected. I collected policy documents, important documents the kindergarten worked with and worked after. I noted a lot of field notes from situations in the kindergarten I observed. I had interviews with teachers and parents, and I also documented what Andrea introduced as the semiotic or landscape or schoolscape, but the data I show you today is from the interviews because there's too little time to show all of it. An important thing to understand or to have in mind when going on is that both kindergartens explicitly viewed multilingualism as a resource. They stated that clearly, both of them. And that was very important for them also and in the Norwegian context, at least now, that is a discourse that is almost so normative that you're not allowed to say anything else. It is also stated in the curriculum for school, and it is also stated in the current framework plan. But at the time of the study, it was not that explicit on the policy document level yet. So we can move to some of the quotes from the interviews. Here we have 2 different teachers talking, and the first one is Andrea. I'm sorry for that. It's not you, and it's not her real name either. Who works, or at that time worked, in Globeflower Kindergarten, and when she tried to explain, and she explained to me how the kindergarten viewed multilingualism, some of what she said was, and then we are very careful about that here, that it is not scary, it's not ugly, it's not stupid. There's nothing negative about having 2 languages. This, of course, sounds positive. It's part of the resource perspective of the kindergarten, and she means well, so there's nothing wrong. Still, it's interesting that she does this negative connection, that they were explicit that it's nothing negative, it's nothing to be ashamed of, and nobody should have a negative view on the multilingual children. In that kindergarten, maybe 40% of the children were multilingual with more than Norwegian at home. And the other interesting thing is that she points to 2 languages, and that is sort of representative for the whole kindergarten, because in their implicit view on multilingualism, being multilingual consisted of having 2 languages, and one of them was Norwegian, and the other one was the mother tongue. So nothing apart from that. So when multilingual children, for example, started using English, the teachers got very worried and tried to restrict that. And then we have Helena, who is a kindergarten teacher in Sunflower Kindergarten. And when I ask her sort of the same question, how do you work with the children? And would you characterize your pedagogical practice, or linguistic practice? She said, no, now I'm trying to think, because I have the feeling that it is like this. There's just multilingualism all day. So there is not one day when I only hear German, for example, or something like that. And I don't expect that either, and it does not need to be like that. And I think it's great, but it's often like this. Many things are already so natural that you don't realize them anymore. And that is quite a different view. And again, it's not only Helena, it's sort of the representative view of the kindergarten, because this is the most translanguaging kindergarten I've ever been to. It took me half an hour, and then in one situation, one of the teachers switched to a different language, which I didn't understand at the time. Afterwards, I got to know she spoke Turkish. And that happened all day. The children switched from German to other languages. The teachers who were multilingual did the same. So it's totally true what Helena's telling. There wasn't one day where everybody spoke German. That was impossible. So and that's the interesting thing, and also that she says it's so natural that you don't realize it anymore. Which means in this kindergarten, being multilingual was the norm. It was the normal thing to be. And that was quite a different perspective. They didn't really count, is it 1, 2, 3, 4 languages, because it was very different. It was just a normal thing to be. And since both kindergartens were so explicit on having a resource perspective, it became more and more interesting throughout the project to try to understand what do these resource perspectives consist of? Because I had got the idea that they're quite different, but in the beginning was different to say in which way. So here, this is another example, and it's actually from the same kindergarten, 2 different teachers, and they're talking about the same family, and that is the most interesting thing, because we have Laura first. She's multilingual herself. And she describes one family where she says, and the father thinks it's too much for the child, Albanian, German, English, and Czech. So I tell him, no, it's not too much for the child. When you speak Albanian and she, the mother, Czech, she can differ quite well between them. And you think it's difficult for her, but she doesn't, which means this child doesn't. She can differ. Children are like that, so they are built like that. And that is Laura. She really, for her, it's very obvious that being multilingual is normal. The children will manage, and please don't worry. And then we have Anne, it's her colleague, same group of children, and she talks about the same family, and she explains it that way. So we have a family here where the parents, speak English together, but now she is learning Albanian, and she's actually Czech, and in addition, German is starting to come, so they have 4 languages to relate to. And in the beginning, the mother didn't speak her home language with the child at all, and her mother tongue, because they thought they wanted to have one language for the family. So the mother learns a new language and speaks with the child only in this language, but if it doesn't work, the parents speak English. And here in kindergarten, it's German, so that is a bit of a compact package. I guess you realize the difference, which is not in the family, but it's in the view of the teachers. Because Anna, she's used to counting languages, so she's numbering them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 is really much. And if you view it this way, it's not strange. It seems much to her. And then also all the in-betweens, the mother learning the father's language, speaking English together, and then they need to learn German, and the child needs to learn German. She has quite a different language ideology, and for her, the view is maybe like the bicycle more, while Laura is on the translanguaging side. So there are quite different understandings of multilingualism, and there are quite different language ideologies, which means thinking about what language actually is. Is it like a certain set of codes, or is it something you have with you in a linguistic repertoire? When I started to wrap up everything after the data, I was done with the analysis, and I tried to frame the research perspective of these two kindergartens. It was a very interesting moment because it was quite different. In the Norwegian kindergarten, the teachers were very engaged in equality and understanding, which meant that they needed a common language, so every child and every parent would understand the content of the kindergarten and what the work they were doing. That was very important to them. And when you try to achieve this equality, you need to focus on one language, and the language they focused on was Norwegian. So the emphasis on Norwegian was very strong in this discourse. But then on the other hand, they also were very engaged in visualizing and acknowledging multilingualism. So in their semiotic landscapes, I have not taken pictures with that now, it was very obvious that this was a multilingual kindergarten. There were flags everywhere, there were like quotes in different languages everywhere. So it was very obvious when people even just passed by the kindergarten. And that discourse made it possible to acknowledge more flexible language use. And in between, there was this field of tension where they had to navigate. And that was also sort of a space they had to navigate. I discussed it with them afterwards, and they said they hadn't really been aware of that there was a tension at all. But in their practices, you could see it. And then on the other hand, in Sunflower Kindergarten in Germany, they didn't really have a field of tension because they weren't engaged in equalizing understanding, but they tried to equalize languages, which means that they didn't want hierarchies. They didn't want German to be hierarchically and higher order than all the other languages. And in addition, they were very keen on promoting the relevance of the children's mother tongue, means that could be either German or any other language. So in Sunflower Kindergarten, the limits of the research perspectives were very difficult to find, actually. While in Globeflower Kindergarten, the tension made it quite visible when the limits were, where the limits were, and what made it difficult. And when we look at the policy documents from that time, connected them to the discourses in place on a more general micro level, you could find some of the same discourses in the policy documents, where in the Norwegian documents there was both a clear emphasis on developing Norwegian and the importance of that, and on acknowledging multilingualism. While the German or the municipality documents that the kindergarten in Germany used were much more flexible when it came to the understanding of language. So it was difficult to trace a language ideology that actually put German into a higher order than any other languages. So there was also an interesting thing how these things were connected in the kindergarten. I'd like to tell you a bit about the parents, because parents, you might know, don't necessarily agree in what kindergartens do. I interviewed 3 parents in the German kindergarten and 2 families or parents in the Norwegian kindergarten. And their views differed from understanding the multilingualism as double monolingualism, like in the bicycle, to a dual view where they were keen on promoting that they're interconnected, the languages, to the dynamic view where they said, we translanguage in our family and it's totally normal. So the views they had differed, like in the kindergartens, across all the models. Something they had in common was that they wanted to maintain the mother tongue. That was important to all of them. And they sometimes, especially the parents in the German kindergarten, they did not necessarily agree on the idea the kindergarten had on promoting various languages. Some of them were very clear on that they would have liked more focus on German. And because they wanted to compensate, some of them sent their children to intensive German teaching in the afternoon or after kindergarten. Some also chose to start with the mother tongue and with formal schooling in the mother tongue before the children actually entered school. And for all of them, these decisions were connected to having a migration background. So still they were sort of working to get into the German society, which was a bit alarming because many of the parents had already grown up in the country themselves. So it was not maybe their parents again that had migrated. And then the other condition, discursive condition, that was very important for the parents was that these children were supposed to start school at some point. And they connected their own school experience to what they wanted or did not want for their children. So all these things played a role when they chose to start formal schooling, to put one emphasis on one language or the others, but not necessarily the same things as the kindergarten teachers would have done. Okay, I can move on to the children's voices, and for that I have two examples. The first one is Anna. And Anna wasn't really my research participant. She was the participant in the project of my colleague. Andrea, you have met her, Marit Sundelin. She works in Tromsø. She started her PhD together with me, and we went to do fieldwork in the same kindergarten. And at some point we found out this we will have to write about, so we have published an article, and that is why I'm allowed to borrow Anna now, because it's already published. Anna, this is not the real Anna, it's just an illustration picture, was a 3 or 4-year-old girl. Her family is from Rwanda. And Anna liked to tell that she was very multilingual. She spoke both French, Rwanda, and Norwegian at home, and she also knew some English. And also the kindergarten anticipated, due to her family background, this could be true. So we also believed the kindergarten. There was no reason to think of anything else until we met her father. And in our positive attitude promoted the idea, oh, great, she's multilingual. And then her father went quite severe and said, my child is not multilingual, my child is Norwegian. And she doesn't know anything else. She might know some phrases in French, and she might have picked up some English from television or media. But apart from that, she only speaks Norwegian. There was a very interesting encounter with both Anna and her father. And it makes us think about a lot of questions, starting with who decides who is multilingual. The next one, because clearly Anna had a different idea than both the kindergarten and we as the researchers had. The next one was the researchers' positionality. How do we position ourselves in between the children, the teachers, and the parents, especially when they have different opinions and views? And then also the question came up, in which way can we understand the children's voices as autonomous here? How do we understand them? And then eventually, what happens when we re-author children's voices, which means when we use them again, we use them in our research. And what does that do? And of course, there are other people who have done research and written about this as well, which we use as background. There's a focus on the researcher's role with the children. A lot of the literature on research in kindergarten. But there's little about that we actually also have to collaborate with at least with the teachers, and we always need the parents to sign the consent form. Otherwise, we're not allowed to have the children as participants. So there is more than just picking a good role with the children. In the Norwegian ethical guidelines, but I think it's not only for Norway, children in general are viewed as vulnerable group. And especially multilingual children, they're like double vulnerable because they're both children and multilingual. That's the one side. The other side is that it's required that children participate in research, not just are done research on. So that's a field of tension to negotiate in. And when we then think about children's voices, the research who's worked on that has pointed out that voices are dialogic, they're contextual. The agency of children is always socio-culturally mediated, and it's affected by language practices, policy, and educational norms. which means that children's voices are not totally autonomous apart from any context, and they might shift, especially when if you follow Bartine, voices shift to where you, for all of us, we all have many of them, and if you're students in a class, it's different than having a voice together with friends, and children at home might have different voices than the same children in an educational institution. And then it's also been pointed out that researchers' influence on what children regard as important to talk about, and that was very clear with Anna, because we think that Anna picked up on this research project. She understood that, being multilingual, that's something good. I also want to be part of that, and I have the possibility, and that's why she started negotiating to be part of the project, which she was in the beginning, and after a while it became clear this became difficult from our perspective. How children understand our roles is also an aspect, and then in general there's this discussion about how do we pick up a children's perspective, because it's not really possible as an adult, but as an analytical construct it is possible to talk about. I want to give you another example. This is Jamal. You have already got to know him, Andrea. And he is a part of my most recent project. I'll go to afterwards. Jamal is a 5-year-old multilingual boy. And in this excerpt, that's an observation a colleague of me wrote down. Jamal and another boy are playing in the wardrobe, and they're without teachers present. They've built guns of Duplo bricks, and Jamal says this is a pium. The boys play with the guns, and after a short while, one of the teachers comes in and tells Jamal clearly, now you take this apart and put the Duplo bricks in there. She points to the Duplo block box. And then she tells me that they do not want the children to build weapons with Duplo. All the children go into the group rooms, they draw and play. After a little while, Jamal goes back to the Duplo in the wardrobe, finds the bricks used for his pium and puts them back together. He is on his own in the wardrobe. The 2 teachers are in the group rooms together with the other children. I am standing inside the group room right next to the door to the wardrobe in order to observe what he is doing without disturbing him. After a little while, Jamal puts the finger on his mouth, it goes like this, and then he waves towards me, the researcher. I take a step closer to him. He shows me what he has built and says, that is the biggest pium. And this is, of course, it's a different child, a different voice in a different context, and negotiating something else than Anna did, because Jamal did not negotiate his multilingualism with us. But he negotiated several other things with us as researchers as well, and right here he's negotiating the kindergarten's rules that have been stated quite explicitly. But as Anna did, when he also shows something about how he understands the researcher's role here. And that is the interesting thing when it comes to methodology, because obviously he understands my colleague as a sort of companion here. He chooses to let him know what he's doing and to show him his big gun, and he would never have done that with a teacher, because the teachers would say, no, you take it apart. So this is also a nice excerpt when it comes to how children might understand us as researchers. And doing ethnographic research, as we do also in this project, as we did with Anna and the other children, there is this question if children understand why we're there for. And the closer you come to the everyday life, the more difficult it might get. And in this project, we also tried to get different roles than the teachers, which obviously was successful, at least with Jamal here. So ending up with a discussion around this, I don't think I have answers to everything, but I think that the researcher has to develop relations to both children, teachers, and parents, and to find legitimate positions when doing this kind of research. And that involves important ethical considerations to address in the relationship with the different groups. And especially, and that is in both cases, Anna is doing something her parents don't like, but very much in favor with what the kindergarten and we thinks. So we got worried a bit for, are there any negative consequences for her with the decisions she tries to make? Jamal, for Jamal, it's more an ethical consideration. Do we want to share this excerpt with the teachers? Because do we break his trust if we do that? Because he showed us something that he would not have shown with the teachers present. We still decided to share it with the teachers afterwards, and they found it quite amusing. So I don't think there will be any negative reactions for Jamal. So it's important to be aware of the power relations, and there is this question of how we take care of children's voices when we re-author them in our research. And also the word re-authoring is a Bertinian word, and it has to do that when we use the same words, so if we retell their stories and our observations in a new different context, like this or like in publications, we do something to their voices, so they're not original anymore. I don't really have a definite answer to this question, but I think it's important to be aware of. Okay, seeing we're doing time-wise. Yeah, that's good. So I'm now moving on to my most recent project, and this Jamal is the link because he is part of this project, and we are a whole bunch of people, as you can see on the picture. The project is ongoing. It's called Multilingualism in Transitions, or Multitrans, as we like to call it in the short version. And this is in no way done, the work. We are still in progress. You have the whole group on the picture, and the guy with where the arrow is pointing at, that's my colleague who noted the observation with Jamal, with whom I've been visiting a kindergarten regularly throughout the last academic year, which means from fall 23 to the summer of 24. So we're also still, again, doing ethnography, longitudinal ethnography. We've collected field notes, lots of observations. I have 2 books with notes of observation. We have had field conversations with the teachers and also with some parents, and also longer interviews with teachers and parents. And also, again, we have documented the semiotic landscapes at different times, and that also gives a time perspective on how this changed throughout the year. And this project in total is not only about kindergarten, it's about transitions in general, which means the first is from kindergarten to school, and the uppermost transition that we study in the project is actually from getting into working life, as from being a student or whatever you've done before. So it's throughout the whole educational pathway in Norway. And we have 2 objectives for the whole project, and what I'm trying to finish up with a very short discussion on is the second one, because one thing we want to do in the project is to generate new knowledge on how the encounter of historical and transnational minority languages shapes new circumstances for multilingual speakers in education context. And the reason for this in the Norwegian context is that the historical minorities, and especially the Sami people, they have different rights for their language and culture throughout the whole education system, and that is part of the reclamation and the revitalization process and the decolonizing process by the Norwegian state. While those moving to Norway with the different language backgrounds, they have it's more of a transition. They have the right for a couple of years to get extra teaching or extra lessons in school and to get support in the kindergarten. But then after 2 years, you're supposed to more or less follow the Norwegian teaching or the Norwegian classes. So the rights are different, and the money for these people comes from different places. But we do know that they meet. So in a regular kindergarten group, you might have Norwegian children or non-ethnic Sami, you might have children with Sami ethnicity, and you might have children with transnational background. So in reality, they meet, and it's very, very uncommon for projects to include both of these groups. So as far as I know, this is one of the first projects who does it, and it's good. We were a bit surprised that we got funding because we almost sort of expected maybe it would be difficult, but. So what we're trying to do now is to work out where do we find the encounters. And I just have one interview excerpt for you here to talk a bit about that. And this is with one kindergarten teacher I interviewed in this kindergarten. We spent a lot of time in last year. Where I ask her about, I'm trying to ask her about if she sees any connection between the transnational children diversity they have in the children's group, because there are several children like Jamal who have different home languages, and the work they do with the Sami topics. And to explain the context is that we have a Sami National Day in Norway, or the whole north of Scandinavia. It's the 6th of February. And it's also quite common to celebrate the Mother Tongue Day, the International Mother Tongue Day, which is a few weeks later. It's on the 21st of February. So this kindergarten did both. First, the Sami National Day was celebrated, and for the day, but also for more time, there was a strong focus on Sami language and culture. And then 2 weeks later, roughly, they celebrated Mother Tongue Day. And for us as researchers, it was quite clear that this time something happened. The awareness towards language in general and multilingualism increased, both with the teachers and with the children. So we were curious to find out how the teachers view that. So that's why I asked her about it. But you also celebrated both the Sami National Day and Mother Tongue Day earlier this winter. How was your experience with that? And then Maria starts talking, and she talks for a long while. Yes, I think some of these things we celebrated because we have to, in a way. It is mentioned in the framework plan. We shall show diversity and all this. And I agree with that. But then it is a bit that, yes, we celebrate the Sami National Day when it was. We seldom speak about that the rest of the year. And I am Sami myself, but I can't speak the language, for example. I don't know so much about it, but my whole family is Sami. But I feel I don't know enough to, in a way, show that. But we have had posters hanging, which we have put up, and that have been hanging for a long while. And the children can still go to them and ask questions. Or if we talk about language, for example, then we can mention that. So it comes in a bit here and there. And then they know a bit because we did the celebration in February. And sort of you could see it in play, especially around the time. I don't think so much after, but it is mentioned here and there, and then there is the Mother Tongue Day. With these conversations about language and things, and a little about where you come from, then it becomes a common thread throughout the whole year, actually, that it is mentioned. And a bit later she says, but then we got the year before when we celebrated the Sami National Day, there was a child who asked around lunchtime, when will the Sami arrive, actually? That was like, this we haven't made clear enough, because they had imagined the people walking around in kufta, which is the traditional clothing, and with reindeer, and that is not what Sami people look like. And then I could tell that, yes, but I am Sami, but I look like this, and I speak Norwegian, and things like that. Yes, and that is very difficult, in a way, how much they understand, and especially when it is other cultures, which I don't know so well myself, it is difficult to teach them so much that they understand. And there are a lot of things she points to in this interview. One very interesting thing is that she sort of switches or navigates between her private identity as being Sami and her professional identity as being a kindergarten teacher. And these things do not necessarily go along with each other. And that is not uncommon. It's not uncommon what Maria is telling and experiencing. This being Sami, having found out you are Sami, your whole family is Sami, but nobody speaks the language because they all lost the language a lot of decades ago during the colonization process. And it's not a really easy language to learn, so it really takes some effort if you want to learn it. And then since she doesn't know the language, she also feels she doesn't have enough knowledge. So it would not be natural for her to teach the children. But then when this incident comes up that this child has a very specific idea about who the Sami people are, then she sort of navigates in a different way, and she uses herself to explain. That's a very interesting point in the interview. It's also interesting with this discourse on trying not to exotify, because that's a difficulty. That's a field of tension in both schools and kindergartens work with the Sami perspectives. How do we work with them that we don't just mention reindeer husbandry, which is typical, but it's maybe 10% of the Sami people who do that. The rest are doing totally different things. So it's more than reindeer husbandry. And there's also maybe a discourse we find also otherwise in the project, that the idea of being responsible, the responsibility of you have for maintaining or reclaiming, contributing to reclaiming and revitalizing the language and also the culture. So to wrap up, this was one encounter, because she also reflects on knowing on her own background and then moving to other cultures the children have, and how do I include them without being so very familiar with them? It's difficult, but also that the days met in a way with the different minority groups, because there was a stronger focus on language and being multilingual, knowing different languages in general. And in the project, if I lift this a bit from the project in general, and we also work with the nexus analysis framework in that, if we look, as I told you, on the discourses in place on the macro level, these groups are kept quite strictly apart due to very many good reasons. So we're trying to scale down and see what has happened in the social action, what is happening in the social action in the kindergarten or elsewhere. And some encounters we find happen in the participants' everyday life in social action, like celebrating these days and what happens in the aftermath. For example, we have these encounters of the historical bodies like Maria, her own identity, her own education and socialization, and the discourses in place, which say that you have to work with Sami, but it's not so easy. So where she starts navigating. In other participants' voices, we have reflections when participants relate to their experiences to the colonizing history of Norway. It's usually not the best experiences, these cases, but we also can see that as an encounter. And some also happen in our research group because we also have our historical bodies as researchers, and we are quite diverse in the group. And some of us have Sami background and some of us have transnational background. In a way, we are all diverse. And then we can see what I talked about, the discourse of responsibility for reclamation and revitalization, and that is especially visible for the historical minority languages. With the transnational languages, it might be more the responsibility of keeping the mother tongue. That is important for the parents. Okay, this is my quite long reference list, and thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, please.
Avez-vous des questions?
Long talk.
Il fait froid, on est d'accord. Moi, j'ai peut-être juste une question. How did you choose the kindergartens?
Oh, yeah. That differed from the one to the other project. The first my PhD project, I approached 2 kindergartens I knew that were working intensively with multilingualism and multilingual children, and they both said yes. So I was lucky. In the recent project, we had to search for a while. Because kindergartens in Norway are very busy, and sometimes you just don't get an answer, and sometimes they say no because they're too busy. So this was actually the first kindergarten that was sort of within the criteria that said yes. Yeah, that's the easy answer.
So, pragmatic reasons. Okay. Thank you, Anja. Thank you very much for sharing your research. Yes, please.
What strikes you the most during your most recent research when you were in the kindergarten?
Yeah, you're thinking of the newer project, the recent. I think actually that was what is most interesting to me, and maybe for the whole group right now, is to try to work on these encounters. And to find traces of them. And this might be a very Norwegian contextualized idea because there are so few projects that have actually worked on this. So this is the most interesting part right now. There are certainly very many other interesting parts as well, but if you ask me in a year and I've gone through whole data, maybe I can give a better answer. If I have visited one, not yet, but I hope maybe I can do it sometime in the future. But I have seen videos from your research with this one teacher, I think. That's, yeah.